Welcome back, traveler. Tonight we're lighting a candle, not a bonfire. If you learned something weird and wonderful, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is on your clock right now. The steamiest medieval nights were mostly soup. Orgy cells, but the legends say benches, finers, and bedtime. For centuries we've bought medieval orgy myths that were basically 15th century clickbait. Woodcuts with raised eyebrows, sermons that named every place but never a time, and rivals weaponizing rumor to win at politics. Tonight I'll flip the script: doors, bells, and receipts versus neon adjectives. Paradox. Absolutely, when the church shouted. Sin, the paperwork quietly wrote. Late song, one cracked stool. You'll smell the room, tallow cabbage, warm ale turning thin, and feel how licensed mischief stayed inside real rules. Curfew, witnesses, open doors a hand's breadth. We'll tap the historian's nose test so you can spot hype in seconds and keep the good parts. The music, the games, the jokes that ended one verse early. Quick win for you. By the first segment you'll know exactly when a scandalous assembly was just a ring dance with nosy neighbors. You've heard the whispers, medieval orgy myths painted like a fresco, rush-strewn floors, pipe and drum, and shadows dancing faster than the candles. But breathe with me for a second, and step into late medieval nightlife the way a clerk would count coin. Slow, careful, sober. Most group revels' reality looked like feast culture on a budget, guild banquets with too much stew, tavern gatherings where the warm ale spice out-talked the boasts, and neighbors arguing about bread under tallow smoke. Church morality versus rumor did the heavy lifting. Scandalous assemblies often existed more on parchment than in the room. If you follow the music, you'll find a riotous banquet long on noise and short on privacy. People ate shoulder to shoulder, laughed, sang refrains everyone's grandmother knew, and traded bets on whose ox would pull the winter logs. The wool and linen rustle you hear is not a coded wink, it's cramped seating and too many layers. Clandestine gatherings were usually about politics, guild business, or dodging taxes. Yes, a flirtation here, a stolen kiss there, but carnal revels? Not center stage. You couldn't keep a secret with 6 candles and a nosy reeve standing by the door. Slide over to a bathhouse society where rumor swears bacchanal rumors bloomed like steam. Reality? Mixed spaces varied by town. Some baths served stew, beer, and board games, with attendants clattering wooden clogs over wet stone. A few places blurred lines, sure, and that's exactly where preachers aimed their sermons. But even there, rules surfaced, set hours, posted prices, fines for rowdiness. Late medieval nightlife often balanced on a knife edge between licensed fun and moral panics. The bath was a social engine. The orgy was a pamphlet seller's thunder. Now open the door to a tavern after market. You hear pipe and drum, boots scuffing rush-strewn floors, a bench creak that sounds more scandalous than it is. Warm ale spice and onion hit your nose. People toast a deal, sing a chorus, swap riddles, and try to look richer than they are. If someone gets handsy, the host has a cudgel called house rules, and the church bells at curfew back him up. Group revels' reality depended on space. Low ceilings, many eyes, and the eternal risk that your wife's cousin was 2 stools away, watching you fail at discretion. Let's talk law, because parchment remembers better than gossip. Many towns policed scandalous assemblies with broad phrases that caught illicit frolics, but also caught dancing after the bell. Church courts loved a flexible net. Clandestine gatherings, unchaste meetings, licentious festivities. Translation? Sometimes a youth party, sometimes a drinking club, sometimes a political huddle in borrowed clothes. Moral panics tended to surge after bad harvests or scandals among the gentry. When elites stumbled, they pointed at the bathhouse instead, and rumor obliged by putting horns on the steam. Enter the preachers. They described carnal revels like a weather forecast meant to sell umbrellas. not because nothing ever happened, but because anxiety paid in fines and obedience. Their sermon imagery fermented in the public mind, turning a rowdy Shrovetide into the Devil's Garden. Yet when you read the confessions, what you see is anticlimax. Too much ale, clumsy embraces, a brawl over dice. Hush after revels wasn't afterglow. It was neighbours nursing headaches and calculating the price of damaged benches. Feast culture mattered. Guilds threw riotous banquets to bind members with song and meat. There were ritual toasts, comic skits, mock crowns for the night's fool, safe transgressions under watchful eyes. Late medieval nightlife created pressure valves. A well-run feast kept young blood from boiling over in alleys. Medieval orgy myths often hijack those legitimate moments of permitted disorder and repaint them with modern neon. But your average revel was more community glue than clandestine fireworks. Follow me into a town square during carnival. Asks, yes. Lechery personified on a wagon, yes. But notice the choreography. Priest watches from the steps. Beadles herd the wild energy like sheepdogs. Vendors hawk pies, and children chase flour sack giants. It's theatre, licensed inversion, staged rebellion. The line between jest and sin is drawn with chalk, and chalk can be scrubbed at Vespers. Church morality versus rumour thrives on this pageant, each side pointing and claiming victory, while the broom comes out and the town resets its furniture. What about those notorious noble houses? A few chronicles whisper of scandalous assemblies behind tapestries, and we won't pretend silk didn't slip. Yet the record is laced with politics. Enemies called a rival's salon carnal revels when they meant dangerous alliance-making. A misstep became moral theatre. The sources you'd expect to gawk. The household ordinances and expense lists show more money spent on musicians, roast peacocks and dice fines than on anything you'd blush to read aloud. Courts punished appearances, doors closed too long, candles burned too late, laughter too loud after the bell. Back to the bathhouse one more time, because it's the lightning rod. Cities licensed baths because hygiene and revenue beat rumour. Hot water, shaved beards, clean linens. Some had private rooms, many didn't. The staff policed the line between relaxed and reckless. With the same vigour, the host policed his tavern. If an inspector found illicit frolics, fines followed, sometimes exile. And yet the bacchanal rumours kept selling, because they made excellent warnings for sons and thrilling bedtime stories for daughters. The bathhouse society lives in this tension, steaming between necessity and narrative. Listen for the bells. Curfew was the town's reset button. Church bells at curfew didn't just end fun, they protected reputations. After the bell, even innocent strollers could become footnotes in a future accusation. That's why so much late medieval nightlife rushed to conclude with prayers, bows, and loud good nights. The hush after revels wasn't a swoon. It was compliance. People understood that living to feast again meant bowing to the choreography. Lights down, shutters closed, streets cleared, so tomorrow's bread could rise without foot traffic. So, did medieval orgies happen? The safest answer is this. The phrase medieval orgy myths labels something modern minds love, spectacle, pasted onto spaces where spectacle was impractical. Illicit frolics existed at the margins, in inns that ignored fines, in rooms bought with thick purses, in valleys of power where witnesses wore blindfolds. But the baseline group, revel's reality, was communal, regulated, and relentlessly observed. Warm ale spice, tallow smoke, wool and linen rustle, and the constant awareness that your life was a stage with a strict stage manager. Hold that picture as we step toward the scenes that fed the legends. Shrovetide mischief turning to charges, bathhouse crackdowns that made headlines, and a few scandalous assemblies that really did cross the line. You'll see how rumour, law, and human appetite braided a rope strong enough to pull our imaginations centuries forward. You step into Shrovetide, and the street hits you first. Pipe and drum rattling ribs, rush-strewn floors slick with cider, and warm ale spice riding tallow smoke like a cheap halo. This is late medieval nightlife at its loudest. But don't buy the medieval orgy myths yet. What you're seeing is feast culture in costume. A brief holiday where fools get crowns and merchants play pauper just long enough to feel brave. You're shoulder to shoulder with neighbors, the wool and linen rustle, not a wink but a fact. And already church morality versus rumor is taking notes. 25. Shopton. Molstay. On Matthias Rome. Masks tilt the world on purpose. You'd swear those licentious festivities are daring heaven, until you notice the beadles herding the parade like sheepdogs. The mock lords of misrule bark orders that sound scandalous and land safely. Dance there, sing this, toss flour at the baker's son. Group revels reality depends on choreography, permitted inversion, timed jokes, fines ready if the joke breaks its leash. The thrill is real. The guardrails are too. That's how communities burn steam without burning bridges. Follow the carts. A wooden tavern on wheels. Painted sins with comic faces, a dragon made of hoops and linen. You catch bawdy couplets, risque, yes, but more roast than romance. Bacchanal rumours will later paint this as carnal revels. Tonight it's prop comedy with parish oversight. Watch who's counting. The sacristan by the church steps, the guild wardens near the sausage stall. If a skit strays toward illicit frolics, a beadle taps his staff, and the chorus changes. Even mischief keeps a calendar. Inside actual tavern gatherings, the temperature rises. And your skepticism should too. Benches groan, dice click, and some hands wander to you. Truth be told. But the host's cudgel has a name. House Peace, and the church bells at curfew are the world's softest gavel. Riotous banquets spill songs, not orgies. You'll see boastful lads posture till ale turns their speeches to porridge. Then, murmured prayers, loud good nights, and that familiar hush after revels as shutters kiss wood. The street wants bread to rise tomorrow. Sleep is civic duty. Bathhouse society sits at the rumors center, so let's wade in. Steam, chatter, loner sandals knocking like castanets, an attendant scolding a boy for splashing the wrong aunt. Mixed rooms exist in some towns, separated hours in others, posted prices everywhere. Inspectors love surprise visits. Do clandestine gatherings occur? Occasionally, but most scandalous assemblies on record read like tax evasion, not bacchanal. After-hours cups, dice, and the same joke told twice. Moral panics inflate steam into thunder. Now to sermons, those medieval megaphones. A gifted preacher can turn a dull winter into licentious festivities with nothing but adjectives. He'll sketch scandalous assemblies so colourful, you forget he's never named a date. Because anxiety buys obedience. Church morality versus rumour thrives on a good what if? Yet court rolls show the anticlimax. A fine for singing lewd verses. A day in stocks for groping. Taverners charged for serving after bell. Sordid? Sometimes. Systemic orgies? Not with that many candles and cousins. Erivar, night mockery of mismatched marriages and domestic scandal, adds a confusing drumbeat. Pots and pans, masks, rude ballads. It looks like illicit frolics from far away. Up close, it's public discipline disguised as carnival. The very crowd rumor accuses of vice is policing vice with noise. You can hear the paradox. Late medieval nightlife punishes excess by imitating it for an hour. Then the pans go quiet. The couple pays a small fee, and the town recopies its rules by ear. Youth fraternities keep the spark lit, and yes, their edges singe. Sword dancers, archers' clubs, singers with more breath than judgment. They rent a room over a shop and call it fraternity. Medieval orgy myths love their secret keys. The ledger loves their beer bill. When trouble happens, it's broken benches, not broken commandments. Still, magistrates keep a quiver of phrases. Clandestine gatherings, ungoverned merriment, to remind boys that adulthood is a license with terms. Guild feasts are the pressure valves you underestimate. Long tables, ritual toasts, a mock king for laughs, fines for anyone too proud to sing. The roast peacock is theatre. The real meal is solidarity. Group revels reality here is contractual. You pay dues in song coin, and you receive protection in the market. The one time a brawl tips towards scandal, the warden empties the ale and reads the ordinance like scripture. That's the difference between community glue and the pamphleteer's bacchanal rumours. Law loves elastic words, and towns write them on purpose. Night walking, suspicious assemblies, unchaste behaviour, catch-alls that let beadles pull you from shadows before your story writes itself. Are they abused? Sometimes. Do they prevent more? Also sometimes. You, wary traveller, learn the town's meter. Dance near the saint's steps. Avoid corners where the rush-strewn floors hide more than rushes. Carnival is a borrowed cloak. Return it by Vespers. Listen for the leitmotif we've been humming. Pipe and drum, warm ale spice, wool and linen rustle, church bells at curfew, hush after revels. That is the score of late medieval nightlife. Into it, rumour drops a dissonant chord. Medieval orgy myths, so vivid you forget to ask where the fiddler was paid. When you chase sources, you find preachers, satirists and enemies with quills sharper than knives. The ordinary crowd remains stubbornly ordinary, even while pretending otherwise for a song's length. Hold this frame as we follow 3 flashpoints that fed legend into fact. A Shrovetide prank rebranded as sin, a bathhouse raid staged like theatre, and a noble's private mask that turned into everyone's favourite moral panic. You'll see exactly how scandal travels, who packages it, who profits, and why the truth smells less like perfume and more like cabbage and tallow. You're there when it starts. Pipe and drum, a cart dressed as a cow, and 3 lads in flower-dusted masks, pretending to steal the moon. A Shrovetide joke, nothing more. They hoist the baker's peel like a banner, crown a mock bridegroom with a cabbage, and march across rush-strewn floors, while warm ale spice singes the air. Someone shouts a rhyme that rhymes too well, and laughter falls in neat rows, like grain. This is group revels reality, noisy, public, timed. Yet you can already feel the nib of a clerk's quill, lurking behind the tallow smoke, itching to rename the scene. The prank tilts when a cousin of the guild warden, tipsy, tender, and proud of both, decides to bless the mock couple. He isn't a priest, he is ale with a mouth. The crowd roars, the cabbage crown slips, and the mock kiss lands more comic than carnal. But rumour has long arms and sharper eyes. By dawn, a Beadle's report will call it licentious festivities. Never mind the toddlers clapping in the doorway. Never mind the grandmother who smacked the bridegroom with a spoon. Medieval orgy myths love this angle. A jest recast as judgment, a laugh that mutates into law. Watch the choreography crack. The tavern host bangs the table, trying to herd the noise back into song. Church bells at curfew roll in, like tide flattening the last chorus. You smell wool and linen rustle as people shuffle toward the door, murmured prayers mixing with apologies. Outside, the square exhales into the hush after revels, a civic spell that usually resets everyone. But not tonight. A city officer, eager to harvest headlines, pockets 2 phrases, clandestine gatherings and scandalous assemblies, and the prank becomes paperwork. Morning arrives with cold bread and hot language. The summons lists unseemly embraces, unlicensed blessings, and a procession without license. Read that again. The kiss gets equal billing with walking in the wrong direction. Church morality versus rumour acts like a bellows. What was steam now billows. The lads swear it was comic theatre. The Beadle writes carnal revels. The gap between those lines is exactly the width of a fine and a reputation. Late medieval nightlife has rules, and one of them is brutal. If an official writes faster than you speak, he wins the story. You follow the paper trail. Witness, a herd bawdy verses, true, the rhymes were older than the bench. Witness B saw, hands where hands should not be. He means a cabbage rolling downhill. Witness C, feared a bacchanal. He sells pamphlets. That's how bacchanal rumors metastasize. Through adjectives, not evidence. The lads pay a fee for noise. The tavern pays a bigger one for after-bell cups. The baker is fined for letting his peel become a scepter. A riotous banquet turns into account entries, numbers sandblasting nuance. Still, look closer at the outcome. No exile, no stocks this time. Just coins and a stern homily performed like theatre. Why so mild? Because most people present were also most people present at Mass. The town knows the difference between illicit frolics and licensed mischief that slipped a cog. Feast culture needs pressure valves. It punishes the leak, not the existence of pipes. Even the beadle softens when the guild offers to fund fresh rushes for the floor. They scuffed. But myths don't care for moderation. A traveling preacher passes through next week and upgrades the tale. In that town, he booms. Youths enact marriages without priests and feast in taverns like goats. He has no dates, only decibels. It lands because fear loves crisp images. Rush-strewn floors, pipe and drum, candles that flicker like conspiracies. You can almost see the pamphlet seller counting coins. Church morality versus rumor has found its melody, and it's catchy enough to survive bad memory. The boys plan amends the old way, public service as deodorant. They repair benches, carry water for the bathhouse, and escort the beguines after dusk for a week, so watchmen can see them being visibly useful. Bathhouse society appreciates the alms. The bathhouse ledger appreciates the free labor. Rumor begins to yawn. Group revels reality reserts itself. Mischief contained. Town intact, cabbage forgiven. Yet a seed is planted. Next time the steam rises, someone will say, "Remember the Shrovetide orgy?" Even if nothing of the sort occurred. What should you learn from this? That scandalous assemblies are often assemblies first, scandal second, and scandal only on paper. That moral panics flare brightest where officials need wins and winters are long. That the difference between laughter and sin can be a single bell rung 5 minutes too late. If you want to survive late medieval nightlife without becoming a sermon example, you watch the bell, watch the beadle, and never let a prank outpace the broom. Hold your ear to the street. There's another flashpoint coming, this time with steam. A bathhouse raid staged like theatre will prove how easily warmth turns to warning, how inspectors compose morality with door hinges and towels, and how the same room can be drawn as sanctuary or snare depending on who holds the pen. Bring your skepticism and your sandals. The stone will be hot. You enter on a fog of steam and rosemary, stone sweating, lanterns haloed, loner sandals clacking like castanets on wet tile. This is bathhouse society at full hum, men and women by turns depending on the town, posted hours chalked neat, prices nailed to the beam. You catch the wool and linen rustle from the dressing room, the soft slap of water, the ordinary gossip that keeps a city stitched. Late medieval nightlife, yes, but mostly errands in hot water. And yet, medieval orgy myths lick their lips at the doorway, hungry for a scene they can sell. Start with the rules, because that's what inspectors start with. No cups after the second bell, closed tubs only for family, no dice by the pool, no songs that make the towel boys snicker. The keeper repeats them like prayers while pouring warm ale spice into cups for those waiting their turn. Church morality versus rumor hovers behind the lintel, counting towels like souls. You feel the tension, a licensed comfort that rumor keeps trying to unlicense with adjectives. Clandestine gatherings, licentious festivities, carnal revels whispered between coughs. Here's the lineup that feeds bacchanal rumors. A pair of late, cloaks damp with weather and haste. Two lads with dice pretend they aren't dice. An old soldier sings a verse he should have retired at Easter. Group revels reality is still winning. Laughter ordinary, gestures readable, nothing you couldn't show your aunt. But a beat of panic slides down the keeper's temple. He's heard the watcher doing rounds. Raids in this town are theatre with fines for tickets, and tonight the stagehands are taking their places. Watch how a raid is composed. First the hinge creaks too loudly, on purpose, so any actual illicit frolics, if they exist, have a heartbeat to become very interested in the ceiling. Then the beadles cough like magistrates in a cold chapel, and an inspector recites the ordinance as if scripture just turned into a broom. After bell bathing, cups by the pool, unlicensed song. The words are elastic. They stretch to whatever fits. The dice vanish, the soldier swallows a rhyme. Towels act like walls. Everyone's performance shifts. The pair at the corner unwraps, not scandal but chilblains. The boys become models of sobriety, discussing saints with suspicious fluency. The keeper produces his ledger like a shield. He points at names, hours, separate men's and women's times, fees in tidy columns. Warm steam carries his defense to the ceiling. This is a bath, not a mask. The inspector counters by sniffing for spirits and peering into corners, choreographing guilt with his eyes. To rumor, this already reads like carnal revels interrupted. To the ledger, it's just overtime. The inventory begins. You out of the tub. Name, parish, reason for bathing after the bell. The woman answers like a clerk. Suit from the bakehouse. Curfew late because the oven ran slow. My sister is witness. She gestures to the doorway, where a beguine stands like a seal in human form. Guardianship arrives on flat shoes and plain wool. Even the watch take a half step back. Church morality versus rumor hates beguines. They make sin look poorly sourced. Now to the cups. The inspector sniffs one and frowns. Ale, not wine, and thin at that. He cites riotous banquets, and everyone tries not to laugh, because this is tepid broth with a mood. You catch the leitmotif, rush-strewn floors in the antechamber, pipe and drum, imaginary in the inspector's cadence, church bells at curfew echoing through the stone. The raid is a pageant playing to an audience of future readers. The fines require a plot, so the script says illicit frolics, even when the props say towels and footstools. What about the worst corner? Inspectors linger by the small private room as if it owes them a confession. The keeper produces the key, opens the door, and reveals a grandmother and a child, the latter complaining that the water is too hot for knees and too cold for stories. Moral panics don't enjoy matinees. The beadles soften in the face of knit eyebrows and prune fingers. Rumor, frustrated, writes around them. We found signs. Signs do a lot of work when facts are being shy. Punishments come down in coins, not chains. The keeper pays for after-bell bathing. A fine he calculated into his week-like weather. The lads lose their dice for a fortnight. The soldier promises to retire the offending verse to a barn. The inspector leaves with a ledger miracle, numbers where narrative wanted kisses. Yet by morning, a pamphlet seller will upgrade the scene. Scandalous assemblies broken by pious officers, clandestine gatherings exposed in steam. Bacchanal rumors travel faster than towels dry. Feel the room after they leave. That hush after revels the town wears like a blanket. Murmured prayers. Not quite. More like muttered arithmetic. People tuck back into benches, finish rinsing, and speak quietly about bread, rents, the price of salt. The keeper rehangs the rules, wipes the beam, and thanks the beguine with a nod that means, "You were my best witness." Group revels reality returns to its default setting. Civic, supervised, decent enough to pass the nose test. What's the lesson you carry? Raids prove the bathhouse is both sanctuary and stage. If you move through late medieval nightlife like a citizen, names, hours, witnesses, you survive the inspector's theatre with nothing worse than a story that smells faintly of rosemary. If you crave spectacle, rumour will happily sell you a ticket labelled Medieval Orgy Myths and refund you in adjectives. The truth is warm water, chalked hours, and a broom that knows the ordinance by heart. And yet, there were nights when reputations and purses brought heat that rules couldn't cool. Not here, not with towels and chalk, but behind rented doors where music drowned the bells and the ledger fell conveniently ill. That's our last flashpoint. A noble's private masque where politics borrowed the smell of vice, and virtue learned to speak through a keyhole. Ready to walk that corridor? You arrive at the side door, where the torch doesn't quite decide if you're invited. A steward murmurs your name into a corridor that tastes of beeswax and expectation, and a page slips you a ribbon that isn't a key, but means the same thing. This is not tavern gatherings noise, it's velvet choreography. The nobles call it a masque. Allegory in silk, yet the town outside will rename it by morning. Medieval orgy myths love this hall before they know what's in it, because secrecy is already half a scandal. Remember your rule. Look for ledgers, not lanterns. The room has a score. Lutes whisper, soft pipes track the ceiling, and dancers orbit a cardboard garden. Full of moral symbols everyone pretends to understand. Masks hide faces and reveal alliances. Who bows to whom? Who bows too deeply? Who doesn't bow at all? Warm ale, spice, and Spanish wine make polite enemies of prudence. Perfumed gloves write little essays in the air. You can feel church morality versus rumor staking out corners, counting minutes till curfew. Group revels reality? So far, this is theatre, expensive and supervised. Enter the plot device, a visiting envoy with pockets heavy enough to tilt the floor. He praises the host's liberality, the knight's liberties, and smiles like a challenge coin. That adjective, liberal, will molt into licentious by dawn, because the envoy's rivals arrived hungry. The masque's script is political, but adjectives travel faster than scripts. You've seen this before. Scandalous assemblies are born when policy needs a villain who can blush on cue. Take a slow look at the furnishings. Brush-strewn floors, yes, but manicured. Candles, yes, but counted. Servants lining the walls like punctuation marks. Clandestine gatherings is how enemies will describe a room filled with witnesses on purpose. The risque allegory, the god of wine teasing the goddess of harvest, is there to flatter donors, not to ignite carnal revels. Yet one mistimed laugh, one hand where a handkerchief should have been, gives rumour all the thread it needs for a banner. Now comes the moment legend quotes out of context. A dancer, masked as knight, draws the envoy into the set's cardboard bower for a choreographed line. A jealous cousin, sore about an inheritance, fetches a churchman who dislikes the host's politics but likes nobles who need favours. The church bells at curfew toll, the steward hustles the finale, and the room performs decency at speed. Masks off, bows deep, doors open. Outside, however, pamphleteers already smell tallow, smoke, and opportunity. Morning writes the masque again with different ink. What was allegory becomes licentious festivities. What was diplomacy becomes carnal revels. What was applause becomes howls. Annal rumours thrive on costume changes. They don't bother with stage directions. The churchman's note to the bishop is careful. He names no sin, only near occasions. That phrase is elastic enough to clothe any ambition. Moral panics don't need facts. They need a seamstress. Watch how the law is baited. Arrival lists charges that aren't crimes by themselves. Closed doors after bell, professional musicians of foreign habit, and cups that refilled too often. It's a packet designed to meet catch-all statutes, suspicious assemblies, night walking, unchaste behaviour, where guilt is a vibe with a seal. The host counters with a ledger. Payments to minstrels, rentals for costumes, alms for the parish poor before and after. Group revels reality wages warrior with arithmetic. Servants become the jury you didn't know you needed. In kitchens and stables they retell the night without adjectives. Who tripped, who spilled, who left early because his shoes were foolish. Their murmured prayers are for their wages. Their testimonies are for the truth. Hush after revels in the noble quarter isn't a swoon. It's staff calculating whether rumour will cut hours. When the bishop's clerk asks, "Did you see licentiousness?" a laundress shrugs, "I saw wine and cardboard." That line will never make the pamphlet. Still, a compromise must be sold. The host pays a donation to repair a chapel window that wasn't broken. The churchman preaches a sermon about vanity without naming a door. The envoy moves on, laughing into his sleeve. Yet the label sticks because labels are cheap, and memory is lazy. Medieval orgy myths will staple this night to this house forever, while the account book quietly records candles, oranges, fiddlers, rushes, and 2 matins fines for my steward's yarns. So what actually happened? Politics bought a scented evening, rumour resold it as sin, and law collected a convenience fee. No bacchanal, no orgy. Just expensive optics skating over brittle alliances. Late medieval nightlife at court wasn't safer than the street. It was simply better at invoices. If you're mapping truth, follow payments, not perfumes. Follow the seating chart, not the masks. And notice that every scandal required a rival with quills and a clerk with time. Here's your takeaway for real life. Spectacle invites adjectives. Accountability invites receipts. When you can't change the adjectives, thicken the receipts, witnesses, schedules, names on paper. That's how the bathhouse keeper survived the raid, and how a careful host survives a mask. The city's memory is lazy but persuadable. Give it verbs that stick. Paid, licensed, witnessed, concluded at bell. Anything else is stage fog waiting for a sermon. Keep that habit as we leave elite rooms and step back into the street where rumour, law, and appetite collide for ordinary people, who paid the fines, who dodged them, who turned play into profit, and who learned to end a song 1 verse before trouble wakes. The next scenes will smell less of oranges and more of onions and damp wool, which is to say, closer to the truth you can spend. Stand in a doorway at dusk and you'll hear the town make up its mind. Geese settle like old gossip. Shutters fold. Pipe and drum fade to a memory the street can hum without blushing. This is the pause where late medieval nightlife decides whether it's civic or selfish. Church bells at curfew don't just ring, they edit. They turn evening stroll into night walking, chat into clandestine gatherings, and any laughter that lingers into a line rumour can underline twice. The watchmen aren't villains, they're metronomes with cudgels. Their beat keeps time so bread can rise, and they prefer boredom to bravery. You can read their faces. 1 counting doors, 1 counting excuses, 1 counting how many fines make a lamp behave. Group revels reality survives because most people cooperate with choreography. Goodnights shouted loud, kisses traded quick, shutters kissed quicker. The hush after revels isn't prudery. It's policy that lets tomorrow start on time. Here's your rule of thumb. After bell, proof beats innocence. 2 neighbors on your arm are better than 1 alibi in your mouth. Names become armor. The beguine at your side. The midwife 2 steps behind. The taverner calling. Home safe then? Church morality versus rumor respects witnesses more than feelings. If you must cross the square, make the square count you. Rush-strewn floors and wool and linen rustle, read as domestic, not decadent. Tavern gatherings know the drill. Hosts stack tankards like hourglasses and clap a final chorus into being before the bell can accuse the silence. Warm ale spice thins to broth. The pipe player pockets his reed. A beadle's silhouette becomes everyone's favourite reason to stand. Licentious festivities don't survive where benches remember names. Unless the last sound is always practical. Latches catching, murmured prayers, a stool dragged home like a conscience. Night-walking laws, love elastic verbs. Lurking, wandering, loitering with intent. Phrases that can stretch over anyone the town wants to remind. Moral panics tighten the weave. A theft, a fire, a scandal among the gentry, and suddenly every shadow is an illicit frolic's audition. You keep your outline honest by moving like a sentence with strong punctuation. Begin at the lamp, proceed past the saint, end at a door that says its click out loud. That's how society adapts in steam and schedules. Posted hours shrink a little in winter. The last ladle of water splashes onto stone like a curtain drop. When raids become theatre, owners lean on ledgers, names written, times chalked, towels counted down like candles. Bacchanal rumours hate arithmetic. They feed on adjectives. If you want to puncture a pamphlet, point at a price list, then at the watchman who initialed it. Young men's clubs, archers, singers, fools for a night, bump the rope without cutting it. They rent rooms above shops and learn the civic magic trick. Keep the door open a finger's width, so sound behaves like community rather than conspiracy. The difference between scandalous assemblies and rehearsal is a witness with elbows. One borrowed aunt or a guild warden with a bored expression turns orgy back into off-key chorus. The bell writes class too. In noble halls, curfew is more suggestion than sentence. In alleys, it's scripture. That's why medieval orgy myths cling to elite doors. Secrecy, plus money perfumes a rumor, until it forgets to sweat. But even there, the ledger lurks. Stewards. Men who can list oranges and vials by weight. When dawn demands receipts, the mask becomes invoices, not indictments. Enforcement is choreography more than combat. Watchmen prefer to redirect, not arrest. Fines are cheaper than cells. You'll hear stock phrases work smoother than riverstones. Home now, name for the role, show the lamp. Learn the counters. With Maud, from the guild, lamps paid. It's a call and response that keeps riot from learning the harmony. When things go wrong, brawl, broken bench, a boast that turned clumsy, reputation pays the first bill. If your last 10 nights were tidy, the beadle finds his soft voice. If your last 10 were noisy, he finds the long quill. That's why feast culture invests in predictability. Riotous banquets are scheduled rebellions, supervised inversions with built-in apologies. The town likes valves. It hates leaks. So what actually happened after the bell? Less than the sermon says, and more than the lullaby promises. People slipped, laughed, bargained for 2 extra minutes of song. Beadles sighed, counted, and wrote words that could stretch to fit the mood. Medieval orgy myths survive because adjectives travel faster than facts. But the nightly truth smelled like tallow smoke, cabbage and rye, ordinary, stubborn, human, and ended almost always with a latch practicing its single honest note. Keep your ear tuned. The next turn of the street hums with songs, games and dares. The playful edges where dice, riddles and ring dances earn both fines and fond memories. That's where legend cut its teeth, and where we can taste the difference between mischief and a charge that grows teeth on parchment. You step into the tavern court on a feast day, and the air already knows the chorus. A tabor bumps out a heartbeat. Pipe and drum stitch a circle. Rush-strewn floors try to keep up. The first ring dance isn't scandal. It's geometry you can hum. Hands link, break, and relink. A cap is tossed. A rhyme gets answered with a better one. Medieval orgy myths peek through the keyhole and mistake choreography for conspiracy. Because outsiders always misread circles. Drinking games travel under the name forfeits, and most are milder than rumor can sell. Miss your verse? Balance a loaf on your head while you walk the bench. Drop the loaf. Tell a joke so clean a beguine would quote it. If a bold lad suggests a kiss forfeit, the host coughs, the room laughs it smaller, and the choir of aunts enforces amnesty. Group revels reality favors embarrassment over entanglement. Memory keeps score, not lips. Dice click like teeth in a pocket. Hazard, Tables shuffleboard with coins. Small wagers hum like bees around a mug. The constable's ordnance pins gaming after bell next to spilling ale and breaking benches. A family of nuisances, not crimes from scripture. Yet pamphlets will later braid dice with illicit frolics, because chance sounds like sin, if you need it to. The ledger in the taverner's hand says otherwise. Losses, wins, and a fee for the cracked stool everyone pretended was a miracle. Riddles and verse duels are the court's favourite sport. A miller opens with something about sacks and grain. A weaver counters with warp and weft. A clerk smuggles in a Latin line, and everyone throws crusts until he translates. None of this is licentious festivities, though it can flirt with wordplay that blushes. Church morality versus rumour hates ambiguity. Crowds adore it. The forfeit for vulgarity is simple. Scrub the threshold while the rest of us sing the long version of St. Martin. Circle dances make rumour dizzy. The steps are set. The jokes are old. The chaperones are everywhere. The wool and linen rustle you hear is the fabric of order, not hinting skin. When a chorus moves to a partner swap pattern, grandmothers on benches count beats like beadles. You aren't watching clandestine gatherings. You're watching licensed community maintenance. The only heat comes from bodies that have been milling flour all week and finally get to pretend they float. Children rehearse the adult world in miniature. They trade pebbles, chant clapping songs, play King of the Hill on the log pile. If you want to hear how moral panics are born, listen to an outsider misread a child's dare. They're practicing wickedness, he mutters, because he doesn't remember that courage also needs games. Later, his pamphlet will borrow the words riotous banquets, forgetting this afternoon's apple cores and skinned knees. Mock courts inside the tavern. Oh, these make trouble and peace in equal measure. Someone becomes mayor of fools, another constable of crumbs, and charges are read, hoarding jokes, singing off key, failing to pay the pie man in compliments. Fines are paid in verses or chores. This performative discipline looks like license from far away. Up close, it's a safety valve. The town prefers a stage where mischief kneels to laughter, rather than an alley where mischief ululates to knives. Wagers in this room are tangible. A boot shine, a fresh candle, a pie slice rescued from the corner. Bodies are never the prize. Reputation is. If a fool suggests otherwise, the landlady wipes the table with a look that could excommunicate a saint. The taverner's ledger, prices, names, hours, does silent PR all evening. Tomorrow, if rumour attempts to rename tonight, the ledger will hum cabbage and candles, not carnality. Space is the secret referee. Doors stay a hand's breadth open. Light spills onto the lane, and the watch can count silhouettes without stepping inside. You play at the threshold, songs in, air out, so the town understands this as participation, not plot. A fully closed door after bell turns games into evidence. The difference between innocent noise and a future summons is often an inch of hinge and a willing bystander. Seasons tune the playlist. May Day brings greenery and harmless bragging. Midsummer throws sparks into the night and dares you to jump the smallest fire. Someone always singes a hem, declares victory, and then sips water while the aunts lecture. These rites flirt with boundaries, they do not invite breach. When a boy leans too close to the dark, the bell reminds him that tomorrow's hay remembers feet. Listen to the way nights end. The final chorus is deliberately familiar. The last round is thin. Church bells at curfew arrive like parents with good timing, and everyone discovers pressing duties at home. Murmured prayers thread through good nights. Stools scrape. A bucket sloshes the floor. Then that civic quiet descends. The hush after revels, which smells exactly like tallow smoke, cabbage, and self-control. It's not romance. It's intermission before ploughs and looms resume their louder songs. Carry this with you. Songs, games, and dares were playgrounds of rumour because they were the public pages where a town scribbled itself. Medieval orgy myths plagiarized margins and sold them as text. If you want the truth, taste the room. Warm ale spice, worn jokes, rules with elbows. The few who tested the fence discovered it was braided from witnesses, fines, and aunties. Next, let's follow the paper trail. Those aunties never needed. Court rolls, penances, and the tiny, telling phrases that turned evenings into entries and entries into legend. Start with the room. A table that smells of tallow smoke and old beeswax, a clerk whose quill scratches like a cricket that never sleeps, and a bench polished by nervous hand. You hand the moment to the scribe, and it leaves changed. Late medieval nightlife enters as noise. Pipe and drum, warm ale spice, wool and linen rustle, and exits as clauses. Night walking, unchaste singing, clandestine gatherings. That's the hinge where medieval orgy myths begin to look official. The ink doesn't prove the party. It proves the paperwork. Church courts and town halls loved elastic language. Suspicious assemblies, lewd conduct in a tavern, riotous banquets after bell. These phrases were nets wide enough to catch both dice and rumour. You can feel the trick. Group revels' reality might have been nothing more than a ring dance and a chorus. The clerk writes, licentious festivities, and suddenly your chorus has a reputation it never auditioned for. Law prefers categories, evenings resist them. Follow a case from shout to sentence. A beadle hears singing after curfew. Next morning he testifies to improper songs. The host counters with a ledger, names, hours, prices, and the court sighs because arithmetic is so unromantic. Still, a fine lands, not for sin, but for timing. That fine will be retold as proof of sin by next market day, because they paid for after-bell ale doesn't carry the thrill of they were caught at illicit frolics. But morality versus rumour buys that upgrade every time. Penances ran on theatre. Public apology at the church porch, a donation for candle wax, sometimes a stint helping sweep rush-strewn floors after a feast. It looked like shame management. It functioned like civic housekeeping. The point wasn't humiliation, it was calibration. Bring the volume down, teach the chorus the right key. Remind the town how to end a song, one verse before trouble wakes. The hush after revels, the court wanted to buy with fines. A cleaner, earlier hush. Language historians love the tiny tells that stuffed legend into lines. Near occasion was a favourite, no act named, just a neighbourhood of danger. Company suspected did similar work, inviting listeners to fill the blank with whatever the latest bacchanal rumours suggested. You hear it, and you realize, adjectives don't describe the past, they recruit the future. The next time a bathhouse society steams past closing, the phrase is already waiting to pin it to the board. Not all entries were vague. Some were as plain as cabbage. Broken bench, spilled ale, quarrel over dice, a scuffle cut short by church bells at curfew. Read 100 of those and your appetite for scandal changes. You start to taste the town's diet, bread, noise, brief temper, quick repentance, more than any whispered carnal revels. And you notice something else. The names repeat. The same lads who paid last Lent are fined this Advent. That's not a secret cult. That's a small population and a long winter. Women appear in the records less than rumour would suggest, and differently. When they do, the phrasing leans toward disorderly house, unlicensed gathering, or hosting after bell, with the heaviest penalties resting on doors, not bodies. The law policed thresholds. A door too long closed became an accomplice. A door, a finger open. Light on the lane, witnesses near. Turned tavern gatherings back into ordinary time. Keys mattered because keys told stories. The court listened for hinges as much as for hymns. Guilds learned to prepare obedience. Ordinances announced feast culture terms. How many cups per man when the pipe and drum must hush? What jokes the mock king may not tell. Break the ordinance, pay the fine. Keep it. Win the town's patience for next year's noise. This is how group revels reality stayed on budget and off the sermon. The paperwork looks dull until you realize it's a peace treaty between appetite and alarm. Even the language of mercy is worth reading aloud. Penance remitted for alms to the poor, fine exchanged for repairs to the bridge. The court turned mischief into infrastructure with a straight face. Legend later erases the bridge and keeps the spice. Your job, walking these margins, is to put the bridge back in the story. Without it, you'll start believing the pamphlets that sold sin by the candle and forgot who paid for new planks. When did records truly blush? When politics needed them to. A noble's private mask becomes unseasonable revels when his rivals want leverage. A bathhouse raid is filed as notorious assemblies if the council requires revenue or a sermon topic. But even then, the clerk's habits betray the truth. He counts cups, not kisses, hours, not hearts. Look for the numbers. Numbers are stubborn. They do not flirt with adjectives. Listen to the courtroom itself. The creak of the door, the cough of the beadle, the murmured prayers of someone who'd rather be anywhere but here. Cases move quickly because the town needs its hands back at looms and ovens. No one has time for epics. They have time for entries. And yet, those entries snowball. By the time the story reaches a distant market, fine for late song has become orgy discovered. Medieval orgy myths are partly a travel disease. Here's the quiet discipline you carry forward. If you want the feel of a night, read the sentence with your nose. Does it smell like ink and tallow? Like cabbage and spilled ale? Like warm ale a spice turning thin as the bell rolls in? That is late medieval nightlife on the page. Ordinary, bounded, audible to beagles with badges. The legends are louder, but the records hum a truer pitch. Keep that hum in your ear as we step from paper back to pavement, into the people who profited from rumor, the minstrels and pamphleteers who made mischief marketable and sold sin by the stanza. Start with the racket of market day, hawkers bawling fish, a piper testing a tune that wants to be famous, tallow smoke riding the breeze like a sales pitch. In that din, scandal is a commodity. You can almost watch medieval orgy myths change hands, whisper to verse to woodcut, woodcut to did you hear? Late medieval nightlife provides the raw material, noise, crowds, the wool and linen rustle of bodies in small rooms. Rumor mills refine it into headlines etched on tongues. You buy a cabbage, someone else buys a story with extra spice. Minstrels are the first converters. Give them a dull evening, tavern gatherings that ended on time, and they'll add a wink between rhymes to keep the hat full. A refrain turns ring dance in the square into licentious festivities behind the bakehouse, but only after the chorus. They're not villains, they're freelancers. The hat demands escalation. When the church bells at curfew roll over the street, the clever minstrel tacks on a final couplet that sniffs at clandestine gatherings. You clap, the hat rattles, the tale grows a second life. Enter the pamphleteer by the Guildhall, selling stanzas like sausages. He holds up a broadsheet with a woodcut of rush-strewn floors, pipe and drum, 2 candles behaving badly, and a caption that promises scandalous assemblies where the stew went cold. He hasn't been to the bathhouse. He's been to a press. But group revels reality doesn't move product. Bacchanal rumors door star. Printer's black turns to moral blues. Stacks of paper turn into certainty you can fold into a pocket and repeat over ale. Preachers, the original influencers, monetize anxiety in a different key. They don't need woodcuts, they have cadence. A sermon paints carnal revels in colors richer than any tavern could afford, then pivots to murmured prayers and penance like a drum roll for donation. Church morality versus rumor isn't a fistfight. It's a duet that sells tickets to both sides. You leave convinced the town is wobbling on the edge of Sodom, yet somehow also reassured that a wax candle and an extra prayer will tug it back by the sleeve. Satirists at court, poets with patrons, weaponize innuendo for politics. If a rival's salon threatens to become a brain trust, they rename it a boudoir with a library. Licentious substitutes for lively, clandestine for exclusive. The poem circulates in velvet, and by the time it trickles down to the street, it's an orgy behind tapestries. The trick works because everyone prefers secrets that flatter their suspicions. Feast culture at the top feeds the hunger below, and the whole city burps rumor. Barbers and bath attendants sit at the junction of steam and speech. They hear everything: blisters, bargains, bruised egos, and choose which parts to launder before hanging them in public. In a fair week, they rinse gossip. In a lean week, they salt it. Bathhouse society depends on their discretion, but rents are not paid with modesty alone. When inspectors stage a raid, it's often because a chatty towel boy wanted to see his words wear boots. Even then, what they saw tends to arrive filtered by fog. Street players and morality troops keep a second economy humming, allegories with jokes that toe the line so tightly even the Beatles crack up. The script scolds vice while detailing it just enough to keep you awake. You leave knowing exactly how not to behave, and with a suspiciously clear image of the behavior in question. It's pedagogy by flirtation, and yes, it oils the axle of moral panics. Nobody admits they paid for the tease. Everybody quotes the lines. Printers learn the value of a suggestive border. A woodcut might show a tavern with 3 mugs and 2 shadows too close, the caption wagging its finger a beat slower than its eyebrows. On licentious festivities in our town, the essay inside tallies fines for singing after bell, but the picture has already framed the facts like a bedroom window. You remember the image, not the arithmetic. And so the ledger loses to the lantern every time. Officials aren't immune. They buy rumor in bulk and resell it as ordnance. Reports of night walking justify an extra bell. Notorious assemblies fund more beadles. Fines keep the bridge mended and the clerk paid. Moral panics keep the fines popular. The loop is elegant. Pamphlets spark vigilance. Raids prove vigilance. Entries in the court book sanitize the fireworks into phrases the next pamphlet can set ablaze again. You can practically hear the cash register under the hush after revels. Profits on the small scale. Landladies with good eyesight and better timing. Room with a window, they say, meaning witness included. They keep trouble from ripening and sell their restraint as hospitality. When a guest hints at illicit frolics, the mop appears. Not today. Reputation is inventory, rumor is shrinkage. The best houses smell like warm ale, spice, stew, and civility. They bleed off myth by making nights legible to the watch. And yet, you can't entirely blame the sellers. You pay them with attention. That's the market rule. If you buy pamphlets that promise sin, authors will keep discovering sin in footnotes. If you tip the minstrel more for a wink, he'll wink twice next market day. The antidote isn't silence. It's appetite management. Ask for the version that names dates, doors, and the ordnance number. Watch how quickly adjectives sober up when nouns get expensive. Carry this frame as we step toward the people rumor bites hardest. Those without the coin or kin to survive a label. Travelers, sex workers, the newly arrived widow, the servant girl with a late shift. You'll see how a single word, nightwalker, notorious, could turn a week into a trial, and how the same town that bought the myth sometimes remembered to buy mercy too. One loaf, one witness, one beadle who knew the difference between noise and harm. Start with the traveller, because strangers taste like spice to a bored town. You arrive at dusk, boots salted with old roads, the late medieval nightlife warming up around pipe and drum, and every pair of eyes does quick arithmetic. No kin, no witnesses, easy to rename. Medieval orgy myths love unanchored people. Adjectives stick better when nobody can peel them off with cousins. You learn fast to rent a corner under the saint's steps. Let your bread cool where everyone can count it, and speak your business in coin-sized sentences. It isn't romance. It's survival through legibility. Now the servant girl with the late shift. Milk on her sleeve, tallow smoke woven into her hair. She's the perfect silhouette for night walking because she's visible and tired. Curfew rings, she's still carrying a message or a pie, and a beadle who needs a number for his role sees clandestine gatherings where she sees a door that won't open. Group revels' reality isn't her enemy. Clocks are. Her best armor is choreography. Pause at the fountain. Call out the destination. Borrow an ant-shaped witness who walks 2 corners and turns back with a yawn big enough for 3. The newly arrived widow comes next. Wool and linen rustle, she bought with pawned spoons. Keys that don't quite trust her hand yet. Rumor tries to accessorize her with adjectives she didn't order. Available, unguarded, merry. Moral panics slot her into scandalous assemblies, even when she's just learning where the baker hides the stale heels. She fights with receipts. Rent stamped by a bored clerk. A parish seat that knows her elbow. Bread traded in daylight for mending. Church morality versus rumor hates dull facts. She feeds it nothing but dull facts until it burps and naps. Sex workers live where law, appetite, and hypocrisy braid ropes. Towns license some, banish others, then fine everyone. When budgets get tired, pamphleteers translate their lives into carnal revels because the woodcut sells. Truth smells like cabbage, wool, and coins that change hands because laundry doesn't pay itself. The hush after revels is their workday's end. Murmured prayers might be gratitude for not freezing. When raids come, fines target doors, not bodies. Disorderly house after bell cups, because thresholds are easier to prosecute than human need. Look hard at apprentices, boys in borrowed feathers who haven't learned how thin tavern benches are. A dare turns into dice. Dice become riotous banquets in a clerk's quill. Mothers become collateral damage when their sons' names appear under suspicious assemblies. Yet most of their sins are decibels, not doctrines. The way out is humiliating and effective. Scrub the rush-strewn floors, sing a hymn 3 keys too high, pay the cracked stool fee, and let the landlady tell the story in a kinder tense next week. Foreigners, merchants with accents, pilgrims with badges, live under magnifying glasses. A private song in the wrong inn becomes licentious festivities because the melody isn't local. They disarm rumor with the universal language of lists, stamped toll receipts, guild letters, the name of a saint that plays well in every postcode. Warm ale spice helps too. Buying a round for the watch and praising the bridge is the medieval version of clearing your cookies. Bathhouse attendants and barbers are rumor's unwilling border guards. They hear everything, especially the parts said with bravado, and paid for in half-truths. When a raid is staged like theatre, they're pulled into the chorus. What did you see? Their best defense is over-documentation. Towels counted, hours chalked, ladles loud. Bacchanal rumors lose altitude in the face of arithmetic, but attendants need a public that enjoys numbers. That's rare on market day, when adjectives go for a song. Consider wives whose husbands drink their courage lopsided. A charivari rattles pans under the window. The street pretends to punish vice while selling tickets to itself. If the crowd tilts cruel, even an orderly home can be recast as a clandestine gathering, because noise writes history faster than reason. The antidote is choreography. A coin for the ringleader, a pie for the loudest aunt, a visible apology from the husband tomorrow. It's unfair theatre. It's also cheaper than a month of pointed sermons. Clerk's assistants, quill hands who translate nights into nouns, pay in conscience, and sometimes coin. A soft heart writes late song, where a meaner pen would write fornication. And that difference feeds or starves a family. You can see them editing myth into manageable misdemeanors when the town has had enough of its own imagination. Their reward is anonymity. Their penalty is the pamphlet that ignores arithmetic and goes chasing adjectives anyway. Paupers and the visibly poor, they're rumor's favorite scaffolding. A group sharing a pot by a door becomes a scandalous assembly. If anyone with a purse needs a villain by morning, the cure is witnesses with elbows, a beguine in the frame, a loaf stamped by the parish, a watchman who eats your stew sometimes and calls it inspection. Mercy disguised as paperwork is still mercy, and it keeps panics from metastasizing. Even the pious get nibbled. Choir boys practicing after bell, lay fraternities meeting by candle, pilgrims trading relic lore too animated for a Tuesday. Church morality versus rumor sometimes argues with itself, and parish fines adjudicate the debate by charging everyone for wax. The fix is boring and brilliant. Post schedules, invite beadles to clap on the 2 and 4, and serve thin ale that tastes like repentance. Let the town learn to associate your lamp with order. So how do the vulnerable outmaneuver a market that buys spice over soup? By making their lives taste like receipts. Say names aloud, move in pairs through the loud parts of night, borrow the town's furniture, saints' porches, guild tables, the fountain's lip, so your story has public handles, and learn 3 sentences that end trouble without starting a war. Daylight or not at all. Name on the ledger first. Bring a witness with elbows. They aren't poetry, but they beat adjectives in court. Keep this lens for the next stretch, when we trace the defensive tech of the streets. Signals, door rituals, and the choreography innkeepers, musicians, and housewives used to keep joy inside the lines. You'll see how fun survived without becoming a footnote in somebody's sermon, and how a broom, a bench, and a bell could turn rumor into background noise. Look first at the door, because the door writes the prologue. A handbreadth open says, "We're part of the street," while a fully latched plank after bell advertises, "Clandestine gatherings to any beadle with a quota." A bench turned outward is an invitation to witnesses. Inward, it risks a pamphlet. Housewives learned a choreography. Broom leaning bristles up, where mending. Lamp near the sill, where visible. Bread cooling in the window, where domestic. Late medieval nightlife didn't hide. It staged legibility so rumor had fewer shadows to rent. Innkeepers engineered the room like traffic cops with aprons. Tables long and low, so eyes could cross the space. No alcoves, where adjectives could squat. Charters nailed at the door. House peace in large letters so even warm ale spice couldn't blur it. The last round was intentionally thin, and the set list had a closing time song everyone knew. When the pipe and drum slid into that cadence, even boastful lads remembered they had shoes to find. Group revels reality survived because the furniture told time. Musicians were living clocks. A taboo roll meant circle dance, but also time to finish your verse, and the fiddler's final drone was practically a curfew bell with strings. They earned extra by keeping the mood inside ordnance lines. Speed up to vent bravado. Slow down so good nights can stack neatly at the door. If someone tried to spin licentious festivities out of a chorus, the band modulated into a hymn fragment. Nothing deflates medieval orgy myths faster than a room accidentally harmonizing with the church steps. Felt how society used steam as semaphore. Ladle strikes marked the half hour. Towel counts were read aloud like psalms. The keeper's chalk tallied rooms in a script the watch could read at a glance. A rope across the small chamber wasn't prudery. It was a receipt that said family only. When inspectors staged a raid, the staff didn't argue adjectives. They handed over numbers. Rumor hates arithmetic, which is why ledgers hung as prominently as lanterns. Street signals were everybody's second language. Watchmen's rattles clicked in patterns. 2 quick for shutters, 1 long for home. Vendors echoed it with shutters and baskets. The fishmonger's board against the jam meant, "We're done." The baker's peel turned vertically meant, "Stop adding verses." Feast culture depended on these low-tech cues. They let rowdy joy cool into order before church morality versus rumor could whip up a fine. Women ran the best counter-espionage with laundry and prayer. Linen on the line at dusk turned tavern gatherings into neighbors helping rinse, and aloud, "God keep the bread from falling," gave the lane a soundtrack of decency. A door ajar with a psalter on the stool dared any pamphleteer to draw a bacchanal from woolen psalms. Even the hushed of revels was curated. A bucket over rush-strewn floors, a stool scrape, a visible yawn. the town's lullaby in practical notes. Landladies mastered exits. No one left alone if the night felt twitchy. Pairs to the corner, then the watch took over, then an auntie intercepted at the same steps. Keys swapped hands in view of the lane, so thresholds stayed exonerated. If a hothead pushed for a private door, the mop appeared with the line every city believed. Daylight or not at all. It wasn't a slogan. It was an insurance policy against scandalous assemblies that only ever lived on paper. Markets had their own fun breaks. Dice allowed on a cloth with a chalk circle. The moment the circle got smudged, the game ended. No speeches needed. Singers earned pennies for clean refrains and lost them for lyrics that strayed. The taverner's ledger tracked both as calmly as bread. Moral panics feed on improvisation. The street kept improvisation wrapped in rules, like a pie kept in crust. Festival rigs came with boundaries baked in. Carnival wagons parked beneath the saint. So skits performed under stone eyes. Midsummer fires were measured with a broom handle so no one, accidentally, jumped into a summons. The mock king wore a paper crown precisely because it smouldered rather than burned. Prop risk, not proof of vice. When medieval orgy myths later repainted these nights, they enlarged the flames and erased the broom. Travelers borrowed street tech to stay uninteresting. Sleep on the church porch, candle stub on the threshold, road letter folded under the head. Signals that said, passing through, not plotting. They learned the three counters that turned adjectives back into errands. Name your witness, name your saint, name your schedule. If a beadle hovered, they praised the bridge. Bridges remember, praise on inspection day. And when all else failed, the city fell back on its oldest gadget, the bell. It wasn't a scold. It was tempo. People learned to feel when a chorus had one verse left, when a joke should land softer, when a kiss belonged to tomorrow. That's the tech that kept joy legal. Room layouts, chalk, rope, songs with sensible endings, doors that practiced honesty out loud. Myths crave neon. The real night wore reflectors. Carry those lenses as we step into the coda. How legends survived, anyway. What bits of heat truly did happen at the edges. How they were amplified. And why our modern appetite keeps buying spice over soup. We'll thread the last corridor carefully, then blow out the lamp together. Start by admitting the obvious. Human appetites didn't take vows of silence just because a beadle had a quill. At the margins of late medieval nightlife, there were rooms bought with thicker purses, doors that learned to forget their hinges, and cups refilled past the patience of the bell. Yet even here, the bass line wasn't the neon version you've heard. What happened most often was anticlimax, boasts wilting into laughter, music outrunning bravado, a steward knocking twice, and the whole scene collapsing back into wool and linen rustle and tallow smoke. The line between story and night was crossed, then rapidly erased. Licensed brothels existed in many towns, and that's where rumor loves to pitch its tent. But read the room. Posted prices, boards who balanced books like shopkeepers, watchmen stopping by to make sure house peace hadn't learned to bite. Clandestine gatherings? Less than you think. The work was transactional, timed, and under tax. Scandalous assemblies flared when politics needed a bonfire, or when a landlord tried to dodge a license. The most repeated scene in records is dull. A fine for afterbell, a lecture about shutters, a broom across the threshold, like a closing hymn. Private feasts could slide warmer. Picture a winter mask, the roast smoking, the vials a key too low, the envoy praising liberality with a grin you don't trust. A kiss tucked into a dance, a boast about a cousin's virtue, a candle that lingers where it shouldn't, enough for bacchanal rumors to stretch like dough. But the room still breathed receipts. Stewards counting cups, servants standing witness, the chapel window conveniently unbroken. When the church bells at curfew tolled, even the bold discovered errands. Warm ale spice thinned to arithmetic. The hush after revels put a lid on adjectives before dawn could lift them. Bathhouse society had its notorious evenings, yes, especially on festival eves when steam plus song equaled courage. A private chamber rented for family sometimes hosted company that argued with that noun. Raids were staged like theatre because theatre is how cities negotiate fear. Inspectors coughed, towels froze, ladles clanged, and the ordnance walked in on tiptoe, pretending to thunder. What the inspector found most often: dice, not Dionysus; chatter, not carnal revels. When something hotter did occur, the punishment followed thresholds, not bodies, disorderly house after bell cups, suspicious assemblies. Fairs and pilgrim seasons were the city's natural tide pools. Strangers flushed the streets with coin and novelty, and morality loosened its collar to take a breath. There were stalls behind stalls, songs with an extra verse, and tents that sold privacy with a smile. Yet even here, the economy of joy stayed legible. Tolls stamped, saints named, gates shut at predictable hours. The big scandals usually started as small ones: 2 hands too proud, 2 words too late. Then grew teeth when a clerk needed variance revenue, or a preacher needed a vivid noun. The real accelerant was rivalry. Elites sharpened adjectives into weapons. A rival salon rebranded as licentious festivities, an enemy's patron sound recast as a smirking alibi. Pamphleteers printed silhouettes hugging too closely to candles. They drew themselves. Minstrels sold the wink between rhymes, because the wink paid better than the rhyme. The fuel wasn't lust, it was market logic. Medieval orgy myths are how cities monetize envy. You buy the tremor of a secret, and the seller buys bread. When heat did break the frame, who cleaned up? Women with aprons and ledgers. The landlady barred the chronic offender. The beguine appeared as a human seal. The host replaced benches and posted bigger letters for house peace. Feast culture survived precisely because it could absorb accidents without surrendering to moral panics. The choreography tightened. Door a hand's breadth open, set lists ending earlier, pipe and drum switching to a psalm fragment when a chorus leaned the wrong way. Group revels reality, adapted like a craft. Consider the law's quiet mercy. Courts burned their brightest adjectives in sermons, then fined in prose. Night walking turned into a small coin for late song. Unchaste meeting became a promise to scrub the threshold. Public penance revarnished reputations with predictable strokes. Bread for the poor, rushes for the knave. Amended fence. The town's memory took the discount, but rumor refused the receipt. It kept the heat, returned the accounting, and resold the story with more smoke. Let's not sanitize. There were ugly nights, coerced moments hiding behind laughter, fists that confused silence for consent, crowds that learned cruelty and pretended it was chorus. Those deserve the dignity of plain words and the justice of names, not the glamour of myth. Even then, note how witnesses mattered. A single auntie with elbows, a watchman with a conscience, a midwife who knew how to point to the saint's window. These could turn a night back toward decency, or at least give the morning someone credible to believe. Why do the louder versions win our ears now? Because spice sells. We inherit pamphlets, not ledgers, sermons, not schedules. The sensory palate, rush-strewn floors, pipe and drum, warm ale spice, feels like an invitation to overpaint. Add a modern neon glow, and you get bacchanal rumors with medieval captions. But when you sniff the sources, the room smells like cabbage and soap, like tallow smoke and repetition. That's not prudery talking, that's the historical nose test. So the edges of heat were real, but bounded. A kiss under a hymn, a door closed 5 minutes too long, a dice game that learned to whisper, a bath ladle that rang the wrong hour. These were the embers. Myth blows on them, law rakes them flat. Life goes on learning curfews by ear. If you want the truest picture, watch what people plan to do. End the chorus 1 verse early, open the door a finger's width, count the cups aloud. If the plan failed, they repaired. That rhythm is the city's real pulse. Carry that pulse with you as the lantern drops lower, or walk out through dawn's kitchen. What mornings look like after the noise. Hangovers cured with onions, benches mended, fines swapped for bridge repairs, and the quiet accounting where a town decides which stories to keep and which to let cool on the sill. That's where legends either crystallize or dissolve back into soup, and you'll finally see why our ancestors favored broth over fireworks when the sun came up. Dawn always tells the truth with onions. You wake to tallow smoke in retreat, warm ale spice turned thin, and the wool and linen rustle of benches being slid back where they belong. Late medieval nightlife shrinks into chores, buckets, brooms, bread. The first sounds are not confessions but accounting. How many stools cracked, which rush-strewn floors need fresh mats, what the landlady's mop can save before rumour beats her to the door. This is the quiet world medieval orgy myths forget to draw. At the tavern, the host opens his ledger like a window. Lines for cups, lines for song, a neat column for after bell. The fee nobody loves, but everybody understands. Group revels reality becomes numbers you can stack. 2 candles, 1 hymn fragment, 1 overlong chorus. Charge half a groat and promise to end sooner next feast day. When a pamphleteer later shouts scandalous assemblies, the ledger answers, stools mended, floors swept, choir hushed at the bell. Arithmetic doesn't sell, but it rules the morning. Hangovers are civic, not romantic. The pieman ladles broth that tastes like mercy. The barber offers vinegar and jokes. The beadle counts heads the way a shepherd counts sheep after thunder. Church morality versus rumour loosens its collar and helps fetch fresh rushes. Nobody wants penance that wastes labour. They want order that starts the ovens on time. Hush after revels reappears as industry, the city's favourite prayer. Penances arrive with brooms, not whips. One fellow scrubs the threshold because his chorus outlived the bell. Another pays for 2 candles since one dripped on the bench. A third recites a short apology at the church porch, while the sacristan nods like a metronome. It's theatre, yes, but productive, shame converted to maintenance. Bacchanal rumours would prefer flames. The parish prefers a swept nave and a bridge that doesn't sulk in rain. In the bathhouse, steam returns without drama. Towels are counted out loud. The keeper chalks yesterday's raid into the margin. Fine paid, towels intact, dice confiscated, verse retired. Bathhouse society inhales, exhale, back to hygiene and business. The inspector's adjectives have already faded into verbs. Wash, rinse, mind the hour. If a gossip asks, was it carnal revels? The keeper points at the mop and says, it was whetstone. Minstrels do their own repentance in drafts. They rewrite the wink into wit, trim the risky verse, pin a new refrain that praises the watch. Not because they've turned saint, but because the hat works better when the beadles smile. Late medieval nightlife learns fast. Keep the fire hot enough for joy, cool enough for reputation. Even rumour merchants respect a town that pays on time. Neighbours perform the small mercies. A beguine brings bread to the landlady who argued with rowdy lads until her throat forgot how to sing. A midwife leaves a posy on the bar for luck. A watchman returns a lost ribbon with a shrug that means, I saw nothing dramatic. These gestures salt the street against moral panics. When medieval orgy myths try to land, they meet a surface rough with kindness and slide off. The court clerk, poor soul, boils last night down to phrases. Late song, after bell cups, bench impaired, perhaps near occasion, if a hymn fragment drifted into the wrong key. He prefers nouns that lift, not smear. Fines become planks for the ferry, or a new lamp at the corner. The town recycles mischief into infrastructure with a straight face. Pamphlets later recycle infrastructure into myth with an even straighter one. Markets open, and memory. Edits. The fishmonger reenacts the brawl with extra elbows. The baker demotes it to boys being bred. You can hear 2 histories competing. Rumour's spice store and arithmetic soup. If you want to know which version will endure, listen to Who Buys Lunch. Housewives choose soup because it feeds people. Pamphleteers choose spice because it feeds adjectives. Practicality is a quiet publisher. Private houses conduct their own matins. Stewards inventory the mask's debris. Oranges, wilted garlands, a single shoe belonging to an ego. Donations are dispatched to the parish with a note that reads like humility and spends like diplomacy. Politics pretends to bow and actually budgets. By evening, the corridor that wore perfume now smells of beeswax and receipts. The story loses neon and gains minutes. Children act as the city's reset button. They chalk games where last night's feet stumbled, sing clean versions of the tunes, and force the square to remember it is a playground before it is a podium. Their clapping songs are rumor-proofing, their giggles are civic glue. When a traveller asks, "Where did the licentious festivities happen?" a child points at a puddle and says, "There was a funny hat." By noon, appetite returns to its day shift. Ovens hum, looms purr, the pipe player becomes a porter, and the landlady sleeps sitting up with pride for a pillow. Moral panics try one last lap around the block and find nobody with breath to run beside them. Group revels reality remains what it always was. Ordinary people practicing joy with guardrails and then fixing the guardrails before supper. If a myth insists on fireworks, the town sells it a broom. Carry that morning cadence forward, because the next stretch is about memory. How stories harden into what everyone knows, how woodcuts outlive ledgers, and how to train your inner historian to smell cabbage through the spice. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly when to laugh, when to doubt, and when to ask for the receipt behind the rumor. Memory in a medieval town didn't live in brains. It lived in objects that could point. A carved pew end, a painted tavern sign, a gilt banner with a joke stitched into the border. These kept last night on the wall, where future nights could see it. Late medieval nightlife, once reduced to chores by morning, climbed back into colour when a minstrel borrowed the sign, or a pamphleteer traced the carving. That's how medieval orgy myths found scaffolding, not from proof of clandestine gatherings, but from images that suggested more than they said. Woodcuts were rumour's cathedral windows. A print could stage rush-strewn floors, pipe and drum, two silhouettes perched a bit too close to a guttering candle, and your mind would finish the script. The caption scolded against scandalous assemblies, but the border teased with flourishes that looked suspiciously like elbows. Printer's ink outlived ledgers. Tallow smoke fades, paper lingers. When the clerk wrote "late song," the woodcut translated it as licentious festivities, and a century later, the picture wins the argument because pictures don't blush. Ballads did similar magic with rhythm. A refrain can smuggle acclaim past skepticism, the way a lullaby smuggles sleep past worry. After the bell, they danced so free sings, better than they paid a small fine for after-bell cups. Warm ale spice returns to your nose just hearing it, and memory ties the scent to the sin that the verse implies. Group revels reality, benches, rules, aunties, never makes a catchy chorus. The wink between rhymes buys the minstrel's supper and mortgages the town's reputation. Sermons curated collective memory with choreographed dread. A preacher named no names, but all the places: bathhouse society, tavern gatherings, a private hall where music dared to linger. He painted bacchanal rumours like a weather map moving east. Parishioners left with murmured prayers and mental images that would survive the hush after revels. Church morality versus rumour wasn't just a debate. It was a memory factory. Anxiety stamps deeper than arithmetic, and Sunday carries farther than Tuesday's ledger. Household storytelling gave rumour a warm chair. Grandmother retold the Shrove-Tide prank with an extra grin. Uncle softened the bathhouse raid until it sounded like opera, and a cousin sharpened the noble's mask into a blade fit for family politics. Each retelling tidied embarrassment and polished suspicion. Memory at the hearth loves theatre. It trims facts to fit the mantle. Town learned to wear its past like a costume that improved with every season. Law, ironically, helped cement legend by writing in flexible ink. Phrases like near occasion, suspicious assemblies, and unchaste behavior were built to bend. Centuries later they read like confession. The court tried to be pragmatic, fines for benches and after-bell song, but language travels without its receipts. When scholars crack open the rolls, the adjectives look juicy, the nouns look dull, and the temptation is to side with juice. That's how a caution becomes a headline in retrospect. Politics poured varnish on the memories that served it, and posterity inherited the scrapbook without the footnotes. A hostess who ran impeccable house peace could still be remembered as the queen of licentious festivities if her enemies commissioned enough verse. The mask is invoices, musicians, oranges, extra rushes, moulded. The satire survived because satire is portable and enemies are reliable archivists. Artifacts collaborate with imagination more eagerly than with historians. A sturdy trestle table dug from a tavern site invites you to picture elbows and songs. A small private room in a bath complex refuses to declare whether it hosted family, fever, or flirtation. The objects are honest but mute. We supply the verbs. If you already bought medieval orgy myths from a woodcut, the trestle becomes Exhibit A. If you've practiced smelling cabbage through spice, it becomes furniture for soup. Time edits with ruthless bias toward drama. Quiet years compress into a sentence. Noisy nights become chapters. One spectacular scandal in a generation glows like a coal under every later anecdote. Town may have hosted 1,000 lawful feasts and 3 messy ones. Memory stacks the messy near the top because exaggeration is a time-saving device. We inherit the pile and mistake its order for proportion. Even scholars, our future selves with better lamps, aren't immune. We quote a preacher for color, a court roll for structure, and a ballad for flavor, then forget that each source was playing to a different audience with different bills to pay. The safest move is a triangle check. Sermon versus ledger versus space. Does the timing fit curfew? Do fines line up with capacity? Can the room hold the sin as described, or only the rumor? Triangle rarely supports neon. So what holds truer over centuries, the adjective or the architecture? Bells and doors, benches and chalk. These are stubborn. Scenes that ignore them tend to be costume dramas stitched from prose. If a story doesn't smell of tallow cabbage and the mop at closing, it's probably a souvenir, not a snapshot. Your inner historian needs a nose as much as eyes. Ask what the floor looked like, who counted the cups, where the watch stood. Answers throttle adjectives into scale. And yet, we shouldn't despise the myths entirely. They tell us what people feared and wanted others to fear. They map anxiety as precisely as ledgers map coin. Read them as warnings, not windows. The echo chamber will keep humming. Woodcuts reprinted, ballads remixed, documentaries swapping neon in for candles, unless we practice the dull heroism of receipts. Memory can be kinder without being naive if we let the ordinary have its due. Start with your senses, not your theories. Step into a scene like you would a tavern. Nose first. Do you smell tallow smoke? Cabbage? Damp wool? Warm ale spice thinning toward closing? Good. That's group revels reality. If the air instead reeks of perfume you can't buy in a market town, you may be sniffing a pamphlet. Late medieval nightlife lived on bread and budgets. Any story that smells like oranges every page is probably borrowing them from a noble's pantry, and borrowing a noble's enemies too. Now, triangulate. Take 3 unlike sources and make them argue. A court roll, a sermon, a space. The roll gives nouns and numbers, after bell, 2 benches, half-grown fine. The sermon supplies adjectives, licentious festivities, carnal revels, moral contagion. The space answers with physics, doors, sightlines, capacity, the way sound stacks under a low ceiling. If the sermon claims a bacchanal in a room that holds 12, with elbows, trust the timber. Architecture is the town's lie detector. Read the clock, the way a beadle does. Curfew wasn't a vibe, it was a time. Bells at vespers and compline slice the evening like bread. Ask, could a song stretch that long? Could a bathhouse stay hot after the second bell given the fuel costs posted in the town accounts? Church morality versus rumour loves ooze. Curfew loves arithmetic. Nights that supposedly run past midnight in 3 paragraphs usually evaporate under the bell's schedule. Follow the money. Feast culture runs on invoices. Who paid the musicians? Who bought the candles? Did the taverners ledger grow a new line for private room that week? Rumour spends adjectives. Life spends coin. Claim without costs is a costume drama. Even scandal leaves receipts. Bribes, donations, repairs to the chapel window that wasn't broken. When the cash trail gets shy, you're likely dealing with a tale that eats attention, not wood and wax. Check class friction. Medieval orgy myths cling to elite halls because secrecy and silk photograph well in woodcuts. But elites leave paper, ordinances, household books, livery lists. If a noble house notoriously hosted scandalous assemblies, you'll see collateral, scolded stewards, replaced rushes, hush money disguised as alms. No paper? Then either nothing much happened, or someone very powerful ensured it never grew legs in ink. Absence of evidence isn't proof of heat. It's a clue about power. Sniff language for elastic phrases. Near occasion, unchaste meeting, suspicious company. Those are legal rubber bands. They were meant to stretch just enough to keep a town tidy, not to testify to neon sins. Translate them into prose the clerk actually enforced. Late, loud, closed door too long. You'll feel the night grow less lurid and more human. Still messy, still fun, but policed by latches and neighbors rather than by medieval Las Vegas. Interrogate the illustrator. Woodcuts were marketing. If the caption scolds but the border flirts, candles leaning suggestively, silhouettes overlapping, assume the printer was selling both piety and spice. Ask what the image can show. The watch peeking in from the door, the landlady's mop, the auntie perched like a hawk. Pictures freeze the 1 second most flattering to rumour. Reanimate them with sound. Pipe and drum, stools scraping, someone coughing a hymn by accident. The scene calms down. Season. The story with calendar. Shrovetide and midsummer are pressure valves. Lenten plague seasons cinch the belt. A riotous banquet in the wrong week is suspicious. A bathhouse, orgy, during fuel shortage is sillier than sinful. Markets shape appetite. Pilgrim tides raise it. Poor harvests convert it into pennants and pamphlets. Build a week around a claim, and you'll learn whether the claim can afford itself. Count witnesses with elbows. Who had reason to see? Who had reason to lie? I prize beguines, midwives, and servants. They narrate in verbs and tasks, not metaphors. He spilled. I scrubbed. Beats! They consorted like goats. When such voices say nothing, assume nothing much, or assume fear. But if they speak, weight them heavier than a travelling preacher auditioning for donations. Audit the room's choreography. Did the host have a closing song everyone knew? Were doors a hand's breadth open to make laughter read as civic rather than secret? Were cups counted aloud? These small technologies, chalk, rope, ritual endings, kept joy legal. Stories that ignore them are repainting the night from memory with a brush dipped in rumour. Reinsert the tech, and you'll see why most evenings ended with yawns, not charges. Separate heat from headline. Yes, edges existed. A kiss in the wrong verse. A door closed 5 minutes too long. A dice game that tried whispering. But headlines enlarge edges. Your task is scale. Ask not, did anything happen? But how much, how long, how often, who paid? A city can host 3 genuine scandals in a decade and 1,000 lawful feasts. Which will the ballad remember? Teach yourself to weight the 1,000, then file the 3 where they belong. Real, rare, instructive. Finally, run the nose test again. Does your reconstruction smell like tallow, cabbage, damp wool, and the hush after revels? The town's favorite scent. If yes, you're close. If it smells like perfume and thunder every other page, hand it back to the pamphleteer with thanks and keep walking. History isn't obligated to be an adrenaline sport. It's obligated to be true enough that you could live in it for an evening and still find your way home when the bell tells you to. Pocket these tools. They'll travel. Next, I'll take you through a single night step by step. Mark it to music to mop. So you can watch the math engine try and fail to start when ordinary people hold their lines. You'll hear the bell, feel the bench, and see how a room prevents its own legend. You arrive at noon when the town smells like onions and hope. Market stalls croon their prices. A piper warms a tune that sounds like it remembers last year better than you do. And the baker's peel flashes like a sunbeam with a job. This is the part the legends skip, the choreography before the chorus. Watch how late medieval nightlife begins in daylight. The taverner posts prices where even a beadle could read them at a trot. The bathhouse chalks its hours. The guild pins a notice for a modest feast with a very immodest promise. Benches repaired before dawn. The ground crew of joy is already working. Afternoon sands the rough edges. Housewives run a quiet census. Who's courting trouble? Who's caught a cough? Who needs a borrowed aunt at dusk? Minstrels barter rehearsal space for a bowl of broth and an agreement to trim the wink out of the third verse. Over at the baths, steam whispers like a kettle that minds the hour. Towel counts sing their multiplication tables. If you're hunting for medieval orgy myths, this is disappointing. If you're hunting for truth, it's delicious. A city tuning itself like an instrument so the evening can play in key. Vespers rings, and the square shifts color. Tolls collapse into bundles, and the pipe and drum stitch a wide circle, geometry that keeps elbows friendly. The first ring dance is half prayer, half pulse check. You learn the steps the way bread learns heat, by staying near older hands. Warm ale spice floats from the inn, like a rumor with manners. Rush-strewn floors await the feet they were hired for. Guild lads chant a call and response that sounds rowdy in invoices as team building. Church morality versus rumor lurks at the corner, and finding nothing to bite, contentedly counts verses. Inside the tavern, the set list is a timetable. The host nods to the fiddler. Two fast, one slow, then a chorus for the aunties. Dice tick like beetles on a cloth ringed with chalk. The chalk keeps them housebroken. Forfeits are tame on purpose. Balance a loaf, recite a proverb backwards, polish the landlady's favorite mug until it catches the candle like a small moon. Group revels reality, prefers embarrassment to heat, because embarrassment remembers to go home. When a boast leans risque, the band slips into a hymn fragment and everyone laughs at their own bravery for stopping. A messenger from the watch does a lap, cloak carrying the weather indoors. Bell in an hour, he says to no one and everyone. The room adjusts, cups thinned, benches pulled straighter, door kept a handbreadth open so laughter reads as civic, not clandestine gatherings. Children appear to collect fathers with the authority only small hands possess. A beguine sits by the threshold like an oak in a storm, and asks after ankles, rent, and the baker's apprentice, who sings too loud but pays on Fridays. This is how a town includes its conscience in the ticket price. Across the lane, the bathhouse lands its evening cadence. The last ladle strikes stone, clang, the half hour, and a towel boy reads the roster aloud. A litany of names designed to bore the inspector into mercy. A pair of dice are confiscated with a smile and a promise to return them after Lent. Someone will later sell bacchanal rumors about this steam. You are here and can only find rosemary chatter and the arithmetic of heat. Sanctuary by schedule is still sanctuary. Compline arrives like a parent with a bedtime story. The final tavern chorus is a song everyone's grandmother taught them, chosen because it ends on time. The pipe and drum fold into silence. The landlady stages exits. Pairs to the corner, then the watch. Then the aunties at the saint steps. The beadle, bored and pleased, collects one name for his role, because it helps his handwriting stay honest. If a lad attempts a kiss forfeit at the threshold, the broom writes the punctuation mark that ends it. Full stop, child, and the room moves on without acquiring adjectives. Out on the square, a youth troupe performs a morality play, sharp enough to amuse sinners and safe enough to soothe saints. The vice character winks exactly once. The hostess smacks him with a ladle the size of a doctrine. The audience roars at its own virtue. Pamphleteers will later misquote this as licentious festivities. The prop ledger lists 2 onions, 1 borrowed ladle, 3 songs licensed by the warden. Woodcuts love silhouettes. Life prefers receipts. Curfew bells roll across the roofs, and the town inhales together. Doors kiss their frames. Shutters settle like eyelids. You hear the hush after revels, that civic silence troweled, smooth by habit. Inside, the tavern becomes a workshop. Mugs stacked. Rushes swept. Cracked stool leg placed next to the mending basket. Like a sinner in the front pew. A short prayer travels the room not as shame but as thanks. We kept joy inside the lines. We'll do it again. Midnight is for inventory, not mischief. The taverner tallies candles against songs, ales against exits. The bathkeeper cross-checks towels against names. The watch notes a cat-sized scandal. A chicken that refused to observe the bell. If your inner pamphleteer is disappointed, feed it cabbage. The safest souls in this city are those who can sleep on arithmetic, because arithmetic keeps fires small and mornings manageable. Late medieval nightlife rides this rhythm like a well-oiled cart. Dawn finds the proofs cooling on windowsills. Bread, ledgers, mended benches, clean steps. The barber opens with vinegar and jokes. The sacristan flicks wax from the nave with the tenderness of a man who understands repetition. His holiness. A minstrel trims his refrain to fit the town's memory rather than challenge it. He prefers a full hat tomorrow over a thrilling sermon today. If anyone tries selling you medieval orgy myths at the fountain, you can gently offer last night's schedule instead. Schedules don't sparkle. They endure. By noon, the story is already molting into legend. 1 verse too spicy at the fish stall, 1 wink too bright in the baker's retelling. You know better, because you walked the whole night with your nose open. Tallow, cabbage, wool, warm ale, spice, turning thin, the bell, the broom, the ledger. That's the city's heartbeat. The myth engine tried to start. Everyday people refuse to be its fuel. And if, at some future feast, heat blooms at the edge, you now know the counter spells. Open the door, a finger's width. Count the cups out loud. End the chorus 1 verse early, and let the bell finish your sentence with grace. If you want to see how yesterday's myths get fresh shoes, open your timeline. Thumbnails are the new woodcuts, high contrast silhouettes, too close candles, captions that wag a finger a beat slower than the eyebrows. A viral thread is a street piper with a better hat, and your scroll is the square at market. The recipe hasn't changed since late medieval nightlife. Take ordinary noise, add adjectives, sell scandalous assemblies to people who are bored at noon and righteous by dusk. You already know the counter. Ask for dates, doors, and who paid for the candles. Influencers are minstrels with metrics. A dull evening won't feed the algorithm, so the wink between rhymes grows 2 extra frames and a shocked face thumbnail. Yesterday's ring dance in the square becomes today's secret party in 3 retellings. Medieval orgy myths become a content pillar because bacchanal rumors have terrific CPM dotcha. Hook is unchanged. Embellish just past deniability, then retreat to just asking questions if a beadle, a moderator, shows up with a rulebook and a broom. Sermon swapped pulpits for podcasts. The cadence is familiar. Paint temptation in 4K. Name no names but all the places. Then pivot to a rescue only your channel can provide. Church morality versus rumor is now a duet between outrage clips and reaction clips. Both cash in on anxiety's long shelf life. In the Middle Ages, the hush after revels arrived with a bell. Today, it arrives when the video ends and the ad starts. Either way, the quiet feels earned, and you've been guided to the shop. Our bathhouse society became group chats and DMs, Steam traded for encryption, towel counts for raid receipts. Raids still run like theatre. A gotcha compilation, dramatic hinge squeak intro, ordnance read in a thread, verdict delivered before the water cools. Most reveals are dice, not Dionysus. Banter, not carnal revels. But the cut suggests heat. The cure is still arithmetic. Context timestamps the mundane schedule that myths hate. Screenshots are ledgers when you insist on showing the whole page. Curfew never vanished. It rebranded as community guidelines. Platforms are watchmen with rattles set to push notifications. Night walking became suspicious activity. Clandestine gatherings became private servers, and the same elastic phrases let moderators redirect rather than jail. Fines turned into demonetization, penance into shadow bans, and public apologies into notes app matins. You survive by moving like a sentence with strong punctuation, clear titles, visible witnesses, exits before the bell. Pay attention to class optics, they still steer rumor. Myths cling to velvet rooms, celebrity parties, closed-door fundraisers, because secrecy plus money perfumes a story until it forgets to sweat. Yet receipts still outlast neon. Staff schedules, vendor invoices, venue capacity. If a tale claims a bacchanal in a space that holds 12 with elbows, trust the timber and the fire code. The physics of rooms is the town's lie detector online, as surely as it was under tallow smoke. Pamphleteers didn't die. They became engagement farmers. They sell spice over soup, because spice travels. You resist by rewarding soup, the unsexy clarification, the boring thread that names ordinances, the quiet video that walks the floor plan. In medieval markets, housewives kept towns honest by spending where bread, not rumor, was fresh. In feeds you play that role with your clicks. The algorithm is a pamphlet press connected to your pulse. Memory still lives in objects that point. Screenshots, stitch clips, duet reactions, each preserving the one frame most flattering to rumor. Your historian's nose test translates. Does the story smell like logistics, budgets, and the mop at closing? Or is it oranges on every page and candles that never drip? Late medieval nightlife was bounded by bells and aunties. Modern nightlife is bounded by tours and mods. If a narrative ignores the boundaries, it's probably selling you a ticket to yesterday's theatre. And yes, edges of heat exist now like then. Real harm, real coercion, real nights where witnesses mattered and justice should have arrived faster. Those deserve names, not neon. Receipts, not riffs. The same tools that kept joy legal back then. Open doors, counted cups, songs with sensible endings, translate into transparent norms today. Clear rules, visible logs, shared context, exits that work. The point isn't to kill fun. It's to keep myths unemployed. Carry this forward as we open the last door. A compact field guide you can hand to any future you who stumbles across a spicy tale with medieval captions. It will fit in a pocket, smell faintly of cabbage and ink, and teach you how to feast without becoming someone else's headline. The bell's not a scold, it's tempo. Let it finish your sentence with grace. Carry this in your mental pocket. Smell first, judge later. If a story reeks of warm ale spice, cabbage, tallow smoke, and the wool and linen rustle of bodies trying to sit on too few benches, you're probably smelling group revels reality. If it smells like oranges on every page and candles that never drip, you're likely holding a pamphlet auditioning for medieval orgy myths. Late medieval nightlife ran on bread and budgets. Fantasy runs on adjectives with expense accounts. Trust the kitchen, not the caption. Rule 1. Ask for nouns with elbows. Who was there? Who counted? What door? Which hour? Scandalous assemblies and clandestine gatherings are elastic phrases. Make the teller name the hinge, the bench, the bell. If curfew rang in that town at Compline, could the chorus and the raid and the rumored encore fit inside the clock? Bells are the city's lie detector. They slice nights into facts. Rule 2. Follow receipts. In feasts and bathhouses alike, life prints invoices. Minstrels paid, cups tallied, towels counted, fines logged. If a tale can't afford itself, fuel for late steam, wages for musicians, silence bought where walls are thin. Scale it down until the arithmetic stops complaining. Bacchanal rumors hate math. Ledgers make them cough. Rule 3. Trust space. A room that holds 12 with elbows cannot host the neon described by a woodcut that prefers silhouettes to physics. Walk the scene in your head. Doors a handbreadth open or latched. Sightlines long or broken. Is there a place for the watch to lean without being part of the play? Architecture is a blunt theologian. It believes in limits. Rule 4. Wait witnesses. Beguines, midwives, stewards, and landladies speak in chores. He spilled, I scrubbed. A preacher paints temptation in oils. A minstrel sells the wink between rhymes. A pamphleteer embosses the margins with horns. Give verbs more gravity than adjectives. If the only eyewitness is a metaphor, send the story back for another draft. Rule 5. Red endings. Nights that end with church bells at curfew, murmured prayers, benches stacked, and the hush after revels are civic, not clandestine. A planned final, a hymn fragment, a thin last round, escort pairs to the corner, means the host is steering, not swerving. Myths prefer engines that roar. Reality prefers brakes that work. Rule 6. Separate heat from headline. Edges existed. A door closed 5 minutes too long. A kiss tucked into a chorus. Dice learning to whisper. Treat them as embers, not bonfires. Ask cadence questions. How much? How long? How often? Who paid? If the answer is once, briefly, expensively, file it under human, not under legend. Rule 7. Translate elastic law into plain prose. Near occasion means almost stop. Unchaste meeting often means door closed too long. Notorious assemblies can mean someone needed revenue. Courts find benches and after-bell cups because benches crack and bells matter. They didn't have time to prosecute poetry. Rule 8. Test the chorus. Ballads and thumbnails are woodcuts with rhythm. They sell because you hum them. Back with questions. Dates, doors, distances. If the refrain can't survive specifics, it's seasoning without stew. Feast culture rewards predictability. So should your memory. Rule 9. Carry 3 counters in your mouth. Daylight or not at all. Name on the ledger first. Bring a witness with elbows. Those lines kept ordinary joy legal then, and keep stories honest now. They're not romantic, but they are durable. Finally, honor the boring heroics, the mop, the ledger, the bell. If a tale forgets them, it's forgetting the very tools that kept joy from becoming collateral. Rush-strewn floors, pipe and drum, a door left a finger's width open, a closing song 1 verse early. These are the city's true safeguards. When in doubt, ask yourself if you could live through the scene, pay your tab, nod to the watch, and still find bread cooling on a sill by dawn. If yes, you've found the truth scale. If no, hand the myth a broom. You felt it, didn't you? The real weight of a night that ends with a latch, not a headline. When the bell rolled across the roofs and the hush after revels settled, people weren't living in myths. They were living in a choreography that kept joy legal. Doors a hand's breadth open, cups counted aloud. A last chorus chosen because it lands on time. That's the secret spine of the Middle Ages. Ordinary discipline dressed in candles and cabbage, not neon. Take that with you. When a woodcut winks, ask who paid for the wax. When a sermon roars, count the benches. When a rumour sprints, walk the floor plan. The historian's nose test isn't just a trick for the past. It's a life skill. Smell for logistics. Listen for the mop. If a tale can't afford itself in time, money, or space, it's auditioning to be remembered, not to be believed. But don't lose the music. Let the pipe and drum memory linger. ring dances that stitched neighbors together, forfeits that preferred embarrassment over entanglement, bath steam that meant hygiene first, gossip second. The Middle Ages weren't prudish or pornographic, they were practical, and practicality can be beautiful. There's poetry in a town that ends a joke one verse early, so bread can rise tomorrow. So here's my question for you. Two, actually. Which scene surprised you most? The bathhouse raid staged like theatre, or the noble masque where politics borrowed the smell of vice? And in your world today, where do you see new woodcuts, trying to sell spice over soup? Thumbnails, hot takes, viral sermons with better lighting. Drop your thoughts below. Teach the rest of us what your nose picked up. Share this episode with that friend who loves medieval drama and the one who loves receipts. Let them smell the room with you. Tallow, cabbage, warm ale turning thin, and a ledger that hums a steadier tune than rumor. If enough of us practice this, myths don't vanish. They shrink until they fit inside the truth, instead of wearing it like a costume. Before you go, take a last slow look at the square we've walked together. Rush-strewn floors swept clean, benches mended, the watch leaning on a lamp like a punctuation mark. Ordinary stubborn human. That's the pulse that outlives pamphlets. History rewards the curious who bring kindness and questions, not torches. If this journey gave you a better nose and a calmer heart, stay with me. We'll keep walking past the headlines into rooms that make sense. And if someday you feel a myth tugging your sleeve, remember the counterspells. Open the door a finger's width, count the cups, end the chorus one verse early. Let the bell finish the story with grace. Thanks for spending the night. I'll keep the lamp ready for our next walk.